My name is Rowan Ellis. I'm 29 years old, and 6 years ago, my mother left me for dead in these woods just outside of Bend, Oregon. Today, I've come back. The air is colder than I expected. Late autumn clings to the pine needles like it doesn't want to be forgotten. I sit on the edge of a moss-covered stump, legs crossed, hands buried in the sleeves of a wool coat I've worn since grad school. In my pocket, folded soft with time, is a green embroidered handkerchief. My sister gave it to me the year she left for college, before she stopped picking up my calls, before she faded into the version of the story that worked best for everyone. I run my fingers along the edge of the cloth, now tracing the looped thread of the letter C. Her name was Celine. I used to think that gift meant something, that she saw me even if no one else did, but when I needed her most, she disappeared like the rest of them. This clearing wasn't always so quiet. 6 years ago, it held every sound in the world: the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a Jeep door, the quick, dry breath of panic pushing through my lungs. I remember how I tried to keep my voice steady when I asked my mom where we were going. "It's a surprise," she said, eyes locked on the road jaw, stiff like she was chewing on something bitter. "Trust me." She pulled off the highway past the last gas station into a corridor of trees so dense it felt like the world was closing in. There was no trail marker, no cabin, not even a fire pit, just silence, a dirt path, and a cold, pitiless sky. She didn't even turn off the engine, just got out, walked around to my side, opened the door, and said, "Out." When I hesitated, she grabbed my elbow and yanked me from the seat. I stumbled one leg, catching under me. My joints were still weak from a recent surgery. She dropped a duffel bag beside me and said flatly, "I'll come back when you're ready to stop making everything about you." And then she was gone. Brake lights flickering like a warning sign through the trees. Gone before I could even say her name. I don't remember crying. Not. Then I remember how the forest swallowed the sound of the engine, how the air turned still, how I stayed frozen in place long after the red lights vanished. It was late afternoon, but it felt like night had already started leaking in through the branches. I didn't scream, I didn't chase after her. Maybe because some part of me already knew she wasn't coming back. I limped toward a deer stand I'd spotted a few yards off the road, crawled under it, curled up around my bag, and tried to make myself invisible. No phone, no food, no wheelchair, just me and the cold. They found me 2 days later. A ranger patrolling a fire trail nearby noticed the sign's torn ground, a shredded granola wrapper, a threadbare coat draped over a branch. He didn't ask questions, just radioed in a pickup, gave me water, and stayed until help arrived. I still don't know who tipped him off. At the hospital, my mother told the staff I had run off, said I had episodes, said she'd been worried sick. I remember watching the nurse nod along as if it made perfect sense, as if mothers don't abandon their daughters in the woods without reason. No one ever asked me for my version of the story. I didn't give it anyway. The truth had already been sealed in my silence, and silence was safer. For a while, now I sit here again in the same clearing 6 years later, the same moss, the same bent trees with their bark peeling like old bandages. But this time, I'm not a girl dragging herself across frozen soil. I came here on my own, drove myself, parked at the trailhead, and walked the half-mile in. My legs are stronger now, not just because of the surgeries or the physical therapy, but because no one carries me anymore. This visit isn't about reliving anything. I'm not here to punish her. I'm not here to reclaim a past that was never mine to keep. I came because something unfinished still waits here. A silence I buried that day, one I'm ready to uncover, not out of anger, but truth. I glanced down at the handkerchief in my lap. It's the only thing she left me, my sister. She used to carry it in her pocket when she had piano recitals, pressing it against her palm before stepping on stage. She gave it to me when I was 14, the week I had my first surgery, and whispered, "So you don't forget you matter." Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. Either way, she never came back to check. I tuck the cloth away and stand slowly, brushing pine needles from my coat. My breath forms small clouds in front of me, and for a moment, I imagine I can see shapes in them. A house I never returned to, a girl I left behind. I don't want answers, I just want quiet. Real quiet, the kind that doesn't pretend everything is fine. Somewhere deeper in these woods, there's a trail I never followed that day. A path I avoided because I was too afraid of what I might find. Now, I'm ready. I start walking one step, then another. The trees don't speak. The sky doesn't shift, but for the first time in a long time, the silence feels like mine. I don't remember the moment I stopped expecting to be believed. I only remember the long, slow shape of it, like watching a ceiling leak drip onto a hardwood floor until the whole room quietly rots and no one speaks of the smell. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. The summer was hot and long that year, and the delivery was complicated. I had nerve damage in my left leg, a condition no one seemed to want to say out loud. Words like mild and manageable floated through our house like polite smoke. But the meaning was clear. I was different, and that difference embarrassed my mother. She was the kind of woman who collected appearances the way some people collect tea sets. Our front yard was always trimmed, her hair dyed 2 shades lighter than the season called for, and every birthday card sent on time. Inside that curated world, there was only space for one kind of daughter, and I wasn't it. My sister Sophie arrived 4 years after me on a Sunday morning, with the church bells ringing in the distance. From the start, she was everything I wasn't. Strong lungs, bright eyes, the kind of face people complimented in grocery store aisles. She smiled easily, learned to dance early. Her knees bore the joyful scrapes of playground triumphs. Mine bore surgical scars and medical tape. The contrast didn't bother me at first. I loved her. I was the one who helped her tie her shoelaces when she couldn't get the bows to stay. I drew little animals in the corners of her notebooks. I held her hand when the thunder scared her. But somewhere along the line, love stopped being a bridge and became a measuring stick. By the time I was 10, Sophie's artwork covered the fridge. My own drawings, strange trees with curving spines, faces that didn't smile were kept in a box under my bed. I don't think anyone ever opened it. Once I asked if we could hang one up beside hers. My mother glanced at it, tilted her head, and said, "Maybe later, sweetheart. This one's just different." That word followed me. Different, heavy with politeness, sharp with rejection. My physical therapy sessions were often canceled last minute. Too much traffic. My mother would say, "We'll go next week," but next week never came. Meanwhile, Sophie had violin lessons, ballet practice, tutoring a calendar so full it needed color-coded magnets. No one said the difference out loud. They didn't have to. When I started keeping a journal, it wasn't for poetry. It was survival. I wrote to remind myself I was real, that what I felt actually existed outside of someone's eye roll or silence. I drew the same willow tree over and over its branches, bending, leaning, never quite touching the ground. I didn't know why I kept coming back to that image. I just knew it felt like me. And then one night it all fell apart. We were sitting at the dinner table, chicken green beans and that scratchy tablecloth with sunflowers on it. My aunt was visiting from out of town, and everyone was in high spirits. After dessert, my mother stood in the living room and held up her purse like a trophy. $60, she said, gone. I blinked, unsure what she meant. "Kaylin, she used my full name when she wanted control. Did you take it?" "No," I said quietly. "Of course not." She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's funny, because no one else here has a reason to. And you've been behind on your allowance, haven't you?" My throat tightened. I didn't take it. She turned to the rest of the room. Then who? Everyone froze. My father looked down at his plate. Sophie stared at her lap, chewing her lip. No one spoke. "It always ends up being you, doesn't it?" she added, folding her arms. The tone was almost triumphant. I waited for someone to step in. My cousin Jonah, who I once helped cheat on a math quiz. My aunt, who said I reminded her of her quieter self. Sophie. Nothing. That night, I went to my room and closed the door. My hands shook as I opened my desk drawer, needing to write something down, anything to keep from exploding. But my journal wasn't there. It was already on the kitchen table. Sophie was reading it aloud. She read it in a voice meant to mock. "Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into a void and no one hears me." Then she looked up and said, "Wow." Deep. Everyone laughed, even my father chuckled. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Inside that notebook were drawings of me in a cast of Sophie holding my hand of my mother, smiling in a way she hadn't in years. I had poured myself into those pages. And they tore it apart like it was a joke. I walked in, took the journal from her hands, and walked back out without a word. That was the last time I drew for 5 years. It's strange looking back. I don't think they hated me. I think they needed me to be the quiet one, the invisible one. It made everything else run smoother. Sophie got to be brilliant, and I got to be a lesson in comparison. A warning sign. After a while, I stopped trying. Stopped asking to be seen. I learned how to stay useful. Good grades, quiet mouth don't cause trouble. That was the only way to stay allowed at the table. But inside me, something closed, like a door, or maybe it was a window slowly painted over until even the sunlight forgot how to come through. Now, years later, I can still see Sophie's face that night, not triumphant, just comfortable. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just smiled and walked out of the room like she always belonged, and I never had. I found the sketchbook again last year in a box labeled junk in the attic. The pages smelled like mildew. The spine had warped, but the drawings, they were still there, faded, smudged, but whole. I flipped to the back. On the final page, I had written a single sentence. They need me to be the problem, so they never have to be. And I understood even as a child what it had taken me years to say out loud. They didn't forget me. They erased me on purpose. The trees thin a little as we turn off the paved road, just enough to let the sky peek through in flashes of silver and pine. I sit in the passenger seat, my coat zipped to my chin, hands folded tightly in my lap. We've been driving in silence for nearly an hour. My mother hasn't said a word since we passed the last gas station. Not when I offered her gum. Not when I asked where we were going. Just that same quiet grip on the steering wheel, knuckles, white eyes fixed dead ahead. I tell myself it's just another one of her mood days, that she'll snap out of it after some fresh air or a trail walk. I tell myself that because the alternative is something I'm not ready to believe, not yet. The road narrows into gravel, then dirt. My body tenses with every bump in the path. I'm still recovering from surgery, the one on my right hip. Technically, I'm ambulatory, but every wrong jolt sends a sharp pulse up my spine. She knows this. She helped me sign the release forms. The Jeep comes to a stop in the middle of nowhere. No trailhead, no signs. Just a patch of earth and trees that seem older than time. She doesn't turn off the engine, doesn't look at me. "We're here," she says. Here, my voice cracks on the word. She unbuckles her seatbelt, climbs out, and walks around to my side. I hesitate, expecting an explanation, maybe a nervous smile. Instead, she yanks open my door and gestures for me to get out. "Mom," I say slowly, "what is this?" She doesn't answer, just drops my duffel bag onto the dirt and steps back. Her eyes don't meet mine. "I'll come back," she says, "when you're ready to stop making everything about you." Then she gets back in the car. I try to stand, but my foot slips. The soft part of the earth gives way under my weight. My leg buckles, pain streaking through my thigh. I go down hard, hands scraping across roots and frost. The engine revs once, then fades. I am alone. For a moment, I just lie there, one cheek pressed to the cold ground, heart pounding so loudly I'm afraid it might attract animals. The air smells like pine wet leaves and something sharp. Maybe sap, maybe the metallic taste of disbelief. I try to sit up, my hands tremble, my knees feel foreign, my duffel bag lies beside me, slumped like a body. I unzip it inside. There's a half-full water bottle, a single protein bar, my coat, and a roll of medical tape. No phone, no charger, no flashlight, no note. She planned this. The knowledge spreads slowly, like ink in water. She knew she brought me here on purpose, left me with exactly enough to survive a day, maybe two, left me like a problem she'd finally solved. I drag myself toward the trees. The light is already dimming. The sky has that late afternoon sag where everything feels like it's retreating into shadow. My body aches. My right foot is barely holding weight. I lean on a branch as I move, half hopping, half pulling myself forward. Then I see it, a deer stand maybe 10 feet high. The ladder is missing 2 rungs. The platform above is slick with moss, but beneath it the ground is dry and shielded from wind. I crawl underneath, dragging my bag with me. My breath comes fast, visible in the air. I curl up, coat over my shoulders, duffel under my head. The silence is unbearable, not peaceful hollow, like the world has paused, waiting to see what I'll do. I stare at the tree trunk above me until the lines blur, and then, because there's nothing else to do, I let sleep take me. I wake up to a sound I can't name, a branch breaking, maybe a footstep too heavy to be wind. I don't move, I just listen. My heart starts again, slow and untrusting. Then I hear it again, a rustle soft and deliberate. I lift my head slightly. A figure stands just beyond the edge of the trees, too dark to make out details, but close enough to see the silhouette of a hood, the glint of something metal, maybe a thermos, maybe a zipper. He steps forward, not fast, not threatening. I don't speak. He crouches, reaches into his backpack and pulls out a bottle of water, places it beside me, then a folded flannel coat. No words. He never looks at my face, just moves like someone who's done this before. He gathers sticks, arranges them in a small pile, and sparks a fire with a flint. The flames bloom slow and quiet, like they're trying not to scare me. The warmth hits first, then the smell dry wood, smoke something faintly citrus from the flannel. I haven't felt warm since the car door shut. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't stay long. When he disappears back into the trees, I think I might have imagined him, but the fire is real, the coat is real, and the water tastes like a promise. I sleep again. By morning, the fire is gone. Only ashes remain, but they still radiate faint heat. I push myself up slowly, joints stiff, ankle pulsing. I look around, nothing has moved. Except something at my feet. A piece of paper. I pick it up, hands shaking. The edges are curled, slightly dirty, but I recognize it immediately. It's one of my drawings from a journal I kept in high school. A girl behind a wall of glass hands pressed flat against it, mouth open in a silent scream. I never brought it with me. I never took that journal out of the house. But here it is, at my feet in this forest. I turn it over. There's nothing written on the back. Just the drawing, just me. I stare at it until the edges blur. Then I fold it once carefully and tuck it into the coat pocket where my sister's handkerchief still rests. Who brought it here? How did they find it? Why leave it now? The answers feel as distant as the sky between the trees, but something inside me shifts. Not hope, not yet. Just a flicker. Like maybe someone somewhere saw what they weren't supposed to and didn't look away. I used to think disappearing would feel like drowning, like hands flailing lungs, screaming some dramatic struggle to stay above the surface. But the truth is, when you vanish in plain sight, it's not loud. It's procedural. I'm back in the present now. Back in Oregon. The sky is the same dull gray it was 6 years ago, and the trees don't seem to care what happened between then and now. I sit on a low stone by the trail, a place I once crawled past and traced the faded ridges of bark with my fingertips. I didn't run away, I was left. But that's not the version that made the rounds. Within 48 hours of being found, there were whispers in the hospital hallway. A sheriff's deputy took notes without looking me in the eye. My mother had already spoken to him, told him about past episodes, how I'd always been emotionally volatile. Her tone had that professional grief sound to it, measured, careful, vaguely exhausted. She's been through so much, she said to a nurse, and now this. No one questioned her. No one asked me what happened. The story was already written by the time I could sit up without assistance. The official narrative was simple. Rowan Ellis, age 23, wandered off during a family trip. She was going through a difficult time, fragile, possibly having a breakdown. Her mother was beside herself. Her younger sister, Sophie, had posted a call for prayers on social media within hours of my disappearance. The comments flooded in. Thinking of you. Hope she's found safe. Mental health is no joke. Everyone loves a redemption story, especially one that doesn't require actual accountability. But I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. I didn't disappear. I was discarded. And then I was institutionalized. I don't even remember the name of the facility at first. Everything inside those walls looked the same. White beige folded corners, buzzing lights that never turned off. I was admitted under the Mental Health Intervention Act section, 14B Adult Vulnerability Clause. The paperwork said I was a risk to myself. My mother signed the intake form, so did a general physician I never met. I still have that form. It lives in a folder in my apartment, tucked between tax receipts and utility bills, printed in grayscale, the logo smudged but legible. It lists my diagnosis as acute dissociative episode. The comments section is short and neat. Uncommunicative paranoia, history of withdrawal, previous medical instability. There's a note, patient claims she was left intentionally, but shows signs of disorientation. I never said I was disoriented, I said clearly that she left me. But that version didn't fit the chart. Sophie visited once, brought a small vase of supermarket flowers. She sat across from me with that detached, anxious smile, the kind people wear when they're afraid to catch something. She said, I told them you just needed rest, but Mom says you haven't been taking your meds. I didn't have any meds, never had. She looked confused, then relieved. Oh, well, that's probably why this all spiraled. Then she kissed my cheek and left. I didn't see her again. The weeks dragged on. My days blurred into laminated schedules. Breakfast at 7, therapy at 9, group circle, at 2, lights out at 10. I answered questions, I completed forms, I spoke to a woman who wore cardigans in pastel tones and said things like, let's name the feeling under the thought. I told her I didn't want to be there. She said, no one wants to be here, Rowan, but healing starts with surrender. After a while, I started to wonder if maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe I did run. Maybe I made the forest up. I hadn't seen a mirror in days. My own voice sounded strange. When you're surrounded by people who treat you like you're broken, eventually you start searching for cracks. But late one night, when I couldn't sleep, I stared at the ceiling until the pattern of tiles began to warp, and I remembered something small but undeniable the moment the deer stand came into view. The pain in my side as I crawled toward it, the duffel bag half unzipped, the protein bar wrapper with her handwriting on the corner. I hadn't imagined it, I lived it. The memory anchored me. I requested my discharge 3 times. Each request was denied. The staff said I wasn't exhibiting sufficient stability. I asked what that meant. They said I needed to show cooperative emotional regulation. I said I was calm. They said I was suppressing. Eventually, a counselor named Marcus took interest. He watched me during group sessions, noted how I listened without interrupting, how I wrote quietly in my notebook. One day, he pulled me aside and asked, "What are you not saying?" I told him everything. He didn't believe me at first, but he took notes. 2 weeks later, I was granted discharge on a monitored outpatient basis. My release papers were thin and cold. No apologies. No acknowledgement. Just a line that read, "Patient shows moderate improvement. Follow-up care recommended." My mother didn't come to pick me up. I called a friend from art school. She drove 3 hours, didn't ask questions, just helped me load my bag into her car and handed me a sandwich. It was the first thing that tasted like real food in weeks. Back in Portland, I didn't talk about it. Not to anyone. I started working at a print shop part-time, used the rest of my energy on rebuilding my muscles quietly, applying for studio grants, gathering supplies from thrift stores and donation bins. My life became small, contained, safe. I told myself I was healing. But every so often I would see my name online, an article archived under Mental Health Crisis Resources, a local news piece that labeled me formerly missing. My sister's post still pinned to her profile, the comments glad she got help, so brave of the family to keep fighting for her. No one had fought for me. They just folded the story into something they could live with. I flipped through the intake form again, now seated at my kitchen table. The paper has yellowed slightly. I trace the signature line with my finger, the delicate curve of my mother's initials. Clean, intentional. It wasn't a cry for help. It was an erasure. I tuck the paper back into the folder and snap it shut. I stare out the window as the clouds roll in over the city, thinking about how quickly a person can vanish from their own life. Not with a scream, not with a chase, but with the stroke of a pen. They didn't come looking for me, because in their story, I was already lost, and maybe to them I always had been. It started with a line. One of those strange, out-of-body moments where you're scrolling late at night, too tired to think, and then something catches. I wasn't looking for anything, just half awake, sipping tea in my Portland apartment, clicking links I barely registered. And then there it was, 6 words in an old post on an anonymous blog. She didn't wander off, she was dropped. I froze. The sentence was mine. Word for word from a journal entry I had written during outpatient care when I was still unsure whether my own memories could be trusted. It was something I'd scribbled in the margins of a paper napkin during a therapy lunch break, then later transferred to a notebook I no longer owned. I kept reading. The post continued with more fragments, things no one should have known. A passage about the deer stand, a description of the air that night, the exact line I wrote about my mother's perfume, mixing with frost and disappointment. None of it was public. I never shared those journals. Some I'd thrown away. Others were lost during the move back from the hospital. But here they were, archived, carefully transcribed. Anonymously posted, each entry dated and categorized under a blog titled She Speaks in Ash. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something older. The eerie feeling of being known when you didn't realize anyone was still watching. Over the next week, I read every post. Some were word for word from journals I remembered. Others referenced things I thought I'd only said in therapy moments, so specific I couldn't brush them off as coincidence. The entries weren't frequent. One every few months. No comments, no tags, no followers listed. Just page after page of me filtered through the eyes of someone who had been keeping me. Documenting me. Remembering me. I knew I had to find them. Not out of anger, I just needed to know why. I asked a friend at a local print shop, someone who still did part-time IT work, to help me trace the blog's IP. It was a long shot, but after 2 days, he sent me a message with a location. Sisters, Oregon. Not a company, not a public library, a cabin. That weekend, I packed a small bag and drove the 2.5 hours. The closer I got, the more I questioned myself. What was I even hoping to find? A stranger? A stalker? Someone who had broken into my past and decided to make it theirs. But when I stepped onto the porch of the small pine cabin tucked between fir trees, none of those thoughts made sense anymore. The place was quiet, not eerie, intentional. There were wind chimes made of bent silverware, a porch swing draped in a wool blanket, and an old welcome mat that looked like it had been shaken out more times than it had been stepped on. The door opened before I knocked. He looked exactly like I remembered. Reed Carson. The quiet boy who sat 2 rows behind me in high school English, the one who never spoke unless called on, who once lent me his copy of The Bell Jar when mine disappeared from my locker. He didn't smile when he saw me, just stepped aside and said, "You came." I walked in slowly. The cabin smelled like cedar and lemon oil, clean, warm, soft light pouring in through the windows. On the table next to an old laptop were stacks of paper, some yellowed with time, others crisp and new. My handwriting was on all of them. How I asked. He didn't look up. You used to leave your journals in the library when you worked late, tucked under the desk. I remembered. Back then, I thought I was hiding them, that no one noticed the way I lingered after hours writing until the lights dimmed. I didn't mean to read them. At first, he said I just saw the corner of a drawing, one of those trees you used to do. It looked like something trying not to fall apart. I sat down across from him. He reached for a small tin box on the shelf and placed it on the table. Opened it inside, nestled between folded paper and flash drives, was my past. "There's more," he said gently. "After the news report came out that you'd been found, I started watching. Not in a creepy way, I just knew something wasn't right." He pushed the box toward me. I scanned everything. Printed copies, audio files, a few medical forms, Someone emailed to your school counselor. Back then, I don't know how much of it matters now. I stared at it. The flash drive had my name on it in his handwriting, careful, small lettering. I ran my fingers over it like it might disappear. I didn't know how to help, he said, voice low. So I remembered I wanted there to be a record that you weren't what they said you were. I felt the tears building before I could stop them, not from sadness, not even from relief, but from the quiet, overwhelming weight of being witnessed when you thought no one cared enough to look. You kept me, I whispered. He nodded. Not all of you, just the parts they tried to erase. The fire crackled behind us. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, but inside the cabin, everything was still. I didn't ask why he never reached out. I didn't ask what he hoped I'd do now. None of that mattered. Because he hadn't just remembered me. He had believed me. And in a world where truth gets rewritten so easily, belief is its own form of rescue. I held the flash drive in my hand for a long time before slipping it into my coat pocket. It felt small, weightless, but in that moment, it was the heaviest proof I'd ever carried. Not everything was gone. Not everything had been taken. Somewhere along the line, someone had been watching. Not with judgment, not with pity, just with open eyes. And that had saved me in ways I never knew I needed. The gallery is already humming when I arrive. Soft laughter weaves through the air, mingling with the clink of glasses and the low swell of a string quartet playing something classical and unmemorable. The walls are lined with paintings and sculptures, each tagged with a number, not a name. That's the rule here, anonymity until the end of the night when the jury announces the winners and unveils the artists. I submitted mine under the alias McKay49. No one knows it's me. My boots echo lightly on the hardwood floors as I move toward the far wall where my piece hangs. The glass room. It's large, nearly 5 feet across, centered on a girl framed by a pane of glass, her palms pressed flat against the surface, her mouth open in a silent scream. The background is colorless, drained. The only color lives in her eyes, blue-gray, straining, desperate. There is no door, no exit, only glass. When I painted it, I didn't think of who might see it. I just knew I needed it to exist. A translation of something I had never been allowed to say out loud. I take a seat near the back, behind a cluster of printed programs and a bronze sculpture shaped like a broken lock. I don't want to be seen, not yet. And then I see them. My mother, her ivory scarf tucked into a camel wool coat. My aunt in navy eyes scanning the room like she's evaluating real estate. And Sophie, my sister perched in heels too high for gallery floors, arm-linked casually with her boyfriends. They're here. My stomach tightens, but I don't move. They walk past my painting without a second glance. Sophie pauses, tilts her head. Feels kind of bleak, she says. My mother leans in, inspecting the edges. These sad artists always think suffering is a personality. I don't flinch, I just breathe. They don't know, not yet. The gallery host, a man with a shaved head and a blue velvet blazer, steps up to the microphone near the podium. Thank you all for joining us for this year's Emerging Voices Showcase. He begins. Tonight, we've gathered to honor 12 anonymous artists whose work speaks to hidden stories and unseen truths. We've walked the room. We've listened to your reactions. And now it's time to lift the curtain. Applause. I can feel my heartbeat in the base of my throat. He begins on the left side of the gallery, moving piece by piece. Names are announced. Artists step forward. Hands are shaken. More clapping. Some smiles, a few proud tears. My family claps too, murmuring to each other between announcements. They don't realize what's coming. And then he stops in front of the glass room. He adjusts his microphone slightly. This next piece was one of our most discussed judges described it as haunting, unflinching, and deeply personal. The image of a girl behind glass unseen. Unheard, it stayed with them long after they left the room. He pauses. The glass room is by Rowan Ellis. For a moment, no one moves. The room, once gently buzzing, falls completely silent. Sophie lowers her champagne glass. My aunt's eyebrows lift and her mouth parts just slightly. My mother's expression freezes mid-smile, caught between disbelief and something harder, something like dread. I step forward. My boots are quiet now, not echoing, not hesitant. I stop just short of the painting, my breath steady. I don't make a speech, I don't need to. I turn toward the crowd and say one sentence. You said I wandered off? I point toward the painting. But that's where I was. My voice doesn't rise, I don't cry. I don't explain the forest, the intake forms, the blog, the flash drive. Because I don't owe anyone that. They watch me now, not the girl behind the glass, but the woman who stepped out from it. The room stays still, not out of guilt, but because truth, when spoken, clearly demands pause. My mother blinks once, twice. Sophie's face is flushed unreadable. My aunt looks down at her program like she might find an excuse hidden in the fine print. I take one step back. The gallery placard below the frame reads, "She was never missing, just never believed." I feel the air shift, a rustle of movement, but no one claps, no one laughs. They just look, and I let them. I stay there for another moment, then return to the back of the room, to the chair by the sculpture of the lock. I sit, and for the first time in years, no one asks me to explain myself. No one edits my story mid-sentence. They just see it. All of it. I'm not triumphant. This isn't revenge. This isn't closure, even. It's something simpler, older. It's the space where truth lives once it's no longer afraid to stand still. And for tonight, that's enough. It happens on a Thursday morning. I'm standing in my studio brushing dust from the corner of a canvas I haven't touched in weeks. The sun filters in through the blinds, turning the room gold and shadow in equal parts. My phone buzzes on the shelf. I almost ignore it. Too many gallery follow-ups, too many reporters wanting something I'm not ready to give. But the number is unfamiliar, and it's local. Hello, I answer cautiously. There's a pause, then a voice female, soft but practiced. Is this Rowan Ellis? Yes. This is Dana Whitaker. I'm a caseworker with the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm calling about your former admission to Evergreen Care Center. I blink. My hand rests against the edge of the work table. I feel the familiar tightening in my chest, but I don't respond right away. I know this is unexpected, she continues, but we've recently reopened an internal audit regarding patient intake procedures between 2016 and 2018. Your file came up. I'd like to speak with you if that's all right. About what? She hesitates, and when she speaks again, her tone shifts. There were irregularities. In your documentation, some signatures are missing proper authentication. There are notes, clinical summaries, history reports filed under your name that appear to have been added after the initial intake. I sit down slowly on the nearest stool. You're saying my admission might have been illegal. I'm saying it may not have followed the correct legal protocols, which means you may have been held under a false pretenses clause. The state is investigating liability and may pursue compensation measures. I look around the room, but nothing feels real for a moment. My brushes, the paints, the half-finished work on the easel, they all blur. I'm not sure what to do with that, I say quietly. I understand I can send you the documents we've compiled so far. If you'd like, I can also connect you with a legal advocate. I don't say yes, I don't say no, I just give her my email. The call ends 5 minutes later. I don't move. When the email lands, I open it immediately. Inside is a folder labeled Ellis Review PDF. I scroll. There's a scanned image of the intake form. I remember my mother's signature, neat and familiar, but below it in a different font is a line marked Clinical Summary. Patient exhibits disoriented behavior possible, self-harm, ideation. It's dated 3 days after I was admitted. 3 days! They backdated it. The next page is an internal memo between 2 staff members at Evergreen. The subject line reads, Concerns regarding recent admission. Ellis R. The body of the message is brief. It mentions a missing psych evaluation, an unsigned physician review, and a follow-up note that reads, Patient appears lucid alert. Recommend reassessment of status. It's stamped, signed, time-stamped. It's real. I download the memo, print a copy on my home printer. The paper is warm when I pull it from the tray. I hold it in both hands like it's something sacred. Because it is. For years, I've carried the burden of their version. I let it sink into my bones, creep under my skin, make me doubt my own memory. I was told I'd had a breakdown. I was told I'd invented the betrayal. I was told I needed help. And now finally, I hold a sheet of paper that says, "You were right. They did this." I press the page against my chest, close my eyes, and breathe. I don't think about suing. I don't think about press coverage or damages or court dates. None of that feels like what I need. What I need is to know I wasn't crazy. What I need is to see it written in ink that the problem wasn't my memory. It was the system that found it easier to believe my silence than the possibility of a lie. Later that day, I sit at my desk, the memo beside me, and open the small notebook I've only recently begun to write in again. At the top of a fresh page, I write, "They documented me. Now I'll document them." The difference this time is that no one else gets to define what the story means. Not my mother, not Sophie, not the staff who skimmed my file and nodded along. Just me. For the first time in a long time, the record is in my hands. And that feels like justice. Maybe not loud, maybe not final, but real. And real is enough. The trees are quieter than I remember. I stand in the same clearing where I once lay, curled beneath the deer stand, afraid to sleep and too cold to cry. The forest hasn't changed much. Same moss curling along the trunks, same hush between the branches, like the trees are listening for things no one says out loud. But I've changed. In my coat pocket is a folded piece of paper. I wrote it last night on the train ride in my pen, scratching across the page with slow, deliberate lines. I read it one more time before I kneel and nail it gently to the underside of the wooden beam. To the next girl who's told she's dramatic, I see you. That's all it says. No name, no story, just recognition. I step back and look up at the deer stand. The same platform I once crawled beneath now feels like a relic from a story someone else lived. I place one gloved hand on the bark beside me and whisper, not to anyone in particular, "Thank you." Then I turn and walk away. Back in Portland, the studio hums with low conversation and the occasional creak of old floorboards. Our art collective meets twice a week in a space above an old corner bookstore. The ceilings are too low and the windows too drafty, but it's ours. There are paint stains on every table and thumbtacks in every wall, holding up pieces that range from soft pencil sketches to wild, vibrant abstracts. We never ask for backstories, we just make room for them. Today, the room is quiet. Just 5 of us here. One of the newer girls, her name is Aaliyah. Barely 10, is drawing at the far end of the room. Her head is bent, low, eyes fixed on the page, her tongue pressed to the corner of her lip, the way kids do when they're concentrating hard. I walk over slowly. "What are you working on?" She tilts the paper just enough for me to see a crooked house, slanted roof, tiny windows, and behind the stove, drawn in shaky red crayon, a stick figure curled in on itself. "That's me," she says. I hide behind the fridge when they yell. Her voice is so small it barely registers. I sit down beside her. I don't ask questions, I don't tell her to explain. Instead, I slide a new sheet of paper toward her and ask, "What would it look like if you came out?" She stares at the blank page for a long time. Then she picks up the yellow crayon. The sun she draws is imperfect, a little too big for the sky, its rays uneven, bursting out in every direction like they don't know how to stop. But it's there, bright and clumsy and brave. I don't say much after that, just sit with her as she fills the page, adds grass, a crooked bird, a window with curtains, and the small stick figure now standing in the center of the room. Aaliyah turns to me, eyes wide. "I didn't know I could do that." I nod. "You can—" When she runs off to grab a juice box, I stay seated for a moment longer, staring at the sun she drew. It's not perfect. Neither is healing. Neither is the truth most days. But it's real. And it's hers. Later, when I'm locking up the studio for the evening, I pause to tape her drawing near the doorway, right next to a page someone else once left behind, an outline of a girl behind a wall of glass. Two drawings years apart, one trapped, one stepping into the light. As I walk home beneath the amber streetlights, I think about that moment in the woods all those years ago when I truly believed no one would ever come for me. But someone did come, maybe not with a rescue plan, maybe not with fanfare, but they came. They remembered. They witnessed. And now I witness? Not everyone gets a clean ending. Not everyone gets closure. But some of us get the chance to become the person we once needed, to hold a door open, to offer a yellow crayon, to say nothing and everything all at once. That's where I choose to stand now. Not behind glass. Not in the dark. But here, in the quiet, with a door open just wide enough for someone else to step through. Rowan's journey was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming her voice in a world that tried to silence it. From the quiet woods where she was left behind to the gallery where she stood without apology, her path reminds us that healing does not always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in fragments in a sketch, in a sentence, in a single act of being seen. She was not saved by others, but by her own refusal to disappear. This story is a tribute to anyone who has been dismissed, doubted, or erased. You are not invisible. Your story matters. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect, to share your thoughts in the comments, or to pass this along to someone who might need it. And if you believe in the quiet power of truth, subscribe for more stories that speak to the strength in being still and unshaken.